been back here. But it's a timely talk about why Palestine and why now, and also to frame it in erasing Palestine and narrating Palestine. Now, I'm going to have the presentation, if Zabat could put it up. To begin with, we have to give land recognition. We are living on colonized, stolen land of the indigenous people. And as both Palestinians, but more importantly as Muslims, we always have to reconstitute rights and recognize the rights that belong to the communities that have been impacted. And also to give recognition to our black brothers and sisters who were brought to this country as cargo in ships and continue to struggle and define the moral, ethical foundation for this country. And we're standing on their shoulder. Many of us would not be here without the reforms that they have instituted with the Civil Rights Act, Immigration Rights Act, and we're coming up to voting next week, the Voting Rights Act. All those were made possible by the struggle of our black brothers and sisters. Now, history is very important, right? Now, the largest, oldest olive tree is found in Palestine. It's dated to almost, some say 5,000 years, and some put it at 6,000 years. So in America, when we say something is old, we say it's about 200 years. It's a historical landmark. My own grandfather, great-grandfather's store in the city of Nablus is rather modern. It's only 700 years old in the old city of Nablus. And people in Jerusalem would actually tell you where possibly Jesus walked, and that for them is also current history. So the oldest olive tree is still alive. Just 3 days ago, the Israeli settlers were threatening to actually cut this tree for no other reason. You know, I can understand animosity toward the human beings. I could understand, arresting individual for whatever reason. But what does a tree do to you for you actually to try to actually cut and sever the tree as a form of collective punishment? So that's something that we need to think about. Now, also, I want for us to focus. Just recently, we began to create Palestine Center for Public Policy, because many people say protest is not enough. Yes, protest is not enough, but protest is important. But we're bulking our protest movement with a Palestine Center for Public Policy in order to begin to address the many areas of policy, whether it's use of U.S. weapons, genocide, the violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and a variety of other issues that needs to have policy recommendation. So we're right now in the formative period of this center, and we hired a UN Undersecretary it's clearly understood that was a colonial project. The fact today that some here in the Silicon Valley, because they think they're woke and hip, and they say, oh, it's not a colonial subject, we're just trying to make the desert bloom. Well, Palestine never been a desert. Right? Palestine is the land of milk and honey. And you read it in the biblical text, you have one of the most extensive travel logs is about Palestine. Everybody wrote about Palestine. You don't believe me? Read the Bible. It's all about Palestine. If you don't read what you call the Torah. It's about Palestine. If you don't believe, read some of the Egyptian texts. It spoke about Palestine. Right? The oldest city in history is in Palestine, Jericho. Right? And at least from the almost 9,000 years until 1948, there was no nuclear explosion that made Palestine a desert, unless it's in the mind of the Zionists, and that's a possibility. Right? So again, Palestine is the last settler colony to be commissioned in the 20th century, in line with European colonization. Zionism was born in Europe. Again, repeat after me. Zionism, where was it born? In Europe. It was not born among the Jews in Palestine. It was not born among the Jews in Iraq. It was not born among Jews in Yemen. Was not born among the Jews in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt. Right? It's a European phenomenon born out of European colonization and European anti-Semitism. The fact that today they try to make the Arab Muslim Palestinians as the definition of anti-Semitism, this is one of the most atrocious strategies to be deployed, projecting European anti-Semitism on the Arab and Muslim world. So very important to tell them, this is your own baby, not ours. This is your own baby. It actually came out of your own history, your own context, not in the Muslim world. So Zionism, again, Herzl wanted sovereignty to be granted to us over a portion of the globe large enough to satisfy the original requirements of a nation. The rest we shall manage for ourselves. So Herzl, again, wanted a foothold. Palestine was not the first place for them to actually want to have a state. They were discussing about Argentina. There was discussion about Ethiopia. So the notion that Palestine is the focal point, that actually just developed as a result of a voting and relations with the British. In 1902, that's when they adopted in a much more concrete way the Palestine project. Today, if they went to Ethiopia, we would have been protesting free Ethiopia. Right? So again, the notion that Palestine was the quintessential project is a result of historical development. One of the most propaganda statement that has been used time and time again, a land without a people for a people without a land. Right? This notion has constantly been built that Palestine was an empty land. Actually, the Zionists sent out a delegation early on in the 1900s to take a look at Palestine. And they said that the bride, right, the bride is beautiful, but it's already spoken for. That's how they describe Palestine. The Palestine is a beautiful place. It already heavily populated. Their own reports that they sent as a delegation to investigate Palestine said that there isn't a foot in Palestine except you find somebody cultivating and having a village or a vineyard or population in there. Now we get how to make an area empty. And this is the transfer project. Herzl himself in his writing, in his memoir, he said, we shall try to spirit the penniless population across the border by procuring employment in it in transit countries, while denying it employment in our country. The property owners will come over to our side. Both the process of expropriation and the removal of the poor must be carried out discreetly and circumspectly. That's Herzl speaking about what to do with the Arab population, the Palestinians. Transfer was an important part of Zionist thinking from the inception. Now, in here, every settler colonial project engages in two things, sometimes in succession, sometimes together, sometimes separated by time. Either they commit genocide, right? Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, right? We don't want to forget genocide. The remaining populations are set for transfer, right? Two things. Settler colonialism does not need the population. Genocide and transfer. In the United States, what do we have? Places we call concentration camps or refugee camps. And these were Native Americans. After genocide was carried out, the remaining population were driven into the reservation and also cutting their food supplies by killing the buffalo. Again, for us to remember our history here in the United States, all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, except if you're black, if you're a woman, if you're a Native American, right? So again, America has the ideal, but it's always constantly, people had to struggle to actually fulfill the ideal. So Native Americans were committed to genocide and transfer. Palestinians been committed to genocide and transfer. Understand this. This is part and parcel of settler colonialism. Not incidental, not in the heat of a battle, not because they could not find ways to deal with it. This is what settler colonialism does. This is what they did in South Africa. All right? South Africa, they pushed all the blacks from the best lands in South Africa and constituted what they call black homelands. Those black homelands were only to be reserved, only South Africa recognized these 7 homelands, right? And the whites were in control of all of the best lands, most of the lands, and you had to have a permit to move from one place to the other. I know that many of us say, oh, Gandhi is a great man. Not in South Africa. The South African activists are taking down Gandhi's monuments, because when Gandhi was in South Africa, he was a colonial administrator for the British. Even our history of Gandhi, because white men like him, all of a sudden we have to love him. Right? So we have a distorted reading of history. So that South African activists post George Floyd, they took down the statue not only of Churchill, Cecil Rhodes, but they also took the statues of Gandhi, because for them, Gandhi was part of the colonial administration. Right? So again, history is very, very important for us to understand. So the 6th draft, right, that goes on details in terms of how we arrived to the Balfour Declaration, the most important document that sealed the history of Palestine. We're still, till today, we're still dealing with the outcome of World War I. All the maps in the region, what we call the Middle East, they're drawn in World War I. It was not drawn by Muhammad and Fatima, I'm sorry, or Khadija and Khalid. They were drawn by Sir Percy Cox, and with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, that's how the maps of this region came about. Right? Sykes-Picot Agreement. That's how. Not only that, here's the kicker for all of us, because we're happy. All the flags were designed by the British in a kindergarten, right? They only use 4 colors because they can't deal with complexity. They use 4 colors and they change them in here from a triangle, put the star in here, remove the star in there, put the strip in here, and so on. And that's how we got the flags all almost identical. You have to what you call sometimes, the Jordan flag is like the Palestine flag. You take the star, it becomes the Palestine. You put the star, it becomes the Jordanian flag. All right? When the Afghans got their flag, you saw they put a carpet. Whoa, that's just too complex. It requires sophistication to read the design. So even our flags designed by the British for the most part, right? Just to understand the impact of colonization. The Balfour Declaration was also included in the Declaration of the Establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. This right, not a right, it's a colonial privilege, but it's actually made into a right. The right was recognized in the Balfour Declaration of 2nd November and reaffirmed in the Mandate of League of Nations, which in particular gave international sanction to the historic connection between the Jewish people and Eretz Israel, to the right of the Jewish people to rebuild its national home. All right? So that becomes, the Balfour Declaration becomes the foundation, the constitutional foundation for the state. And is recognized by the major power. Palestinians today are not only fighting Zionism, as you notice. The United States is the major power supporting Israel. Oh, we care about Palestinians, but here's 2,000 pound bomb. Right? Here's the surveillance information. The British are there with all their surveillance over Gaza. Small, what you call area, and the British are there. The German, you would think that one time, 2 times they got it wrong. Now they insist on getting it wrong the 3rd time. The Germans are there sending weapons. Canada, Trudeau, the liberal, right? He's so liberal that you could mistake him with apple pie and, ice cream. He's there supporting Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. We need to send weapons, right? Gaza by itself and Palestine literally is confronting the global, right, order as it is, because many of these states are still beholden to their colonial legacy. It's not only that colonialism in the past, but there's colonialism that needs to still to be reconciled today. There's many questions that have to be addressed. All right. So if we think about how the discussions of Palestine says, and Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long traditions, in present needs, in future hopes of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of 700,000 Arabs who inhabit that ancient land. So it's very important to understand that they were not unaware that they were violating the rights of the Palestinians from the get-go. They understood it, and for them, there is a much more important colonial project to be unfolded. Now, just for people, the British, when they entered Palestine, they celebrated the entry into Palestine as the coming to an end of the Crusades War. Literally, the headline in the newspaper, now is the end of the crusade after 672 years of Muslim rule. That's how they described it. They described the British officers coming into Palestine as reenactment of the Crusaders that before colonized Palestine. I do feel Western Christians have a deep sense of irredentism, that how this area became Muslim and how this territory that was at the heart of what they call Christianity is no longer Christian. And therefore, as a way to reaffirm their historical veracity, is they need to reclaim it. Whether they could kill as many people as possible, this is the way for them to reconstitute their own history and meaning. I would say it's a deep sense of jealousy and almost lack of confidence about what happened and continue happening, in distinction to Eastern Christianity, because we need to understand in the differences between Eastern Christianity and Western Christianity. All right? So it's very important. The Balfour Declaration is a colonial legalism. The Balfour Declaration is a type of colonial legalism reeking in dishonesty, in each word with the sole purpose of providing a cover for the outright civilized thievery of Palestine from its indigenous population. Now, this is from the Eastern Orthodox Sunday. Not only that Muslims in Jerusalem are harassed, but also the Eastern Christians are harassed. There's actually, if you go to Jerusalem during the festivities of Eastern Orthodox Sunday, as well as Christmas, or even every Sunday, the Jewish settlers pass by and spit on the Christians as part of a an obligation or a distorted obligation. And there's so many videos that you could see of this practice that is taking place almost on a weekly basis. It's now moving back. So Israeli settlers spit on nuns in Jerusalem. Again, this is just a common practice as a way of literally with an attitude of utter disregard for the sentiments and the religious statements and positions of Eastern Christians. Now, we get into the most important question of why the British and the Europeans, and later on the Americans, until today, they're still supporting Israel and wanting to be there. Now, I know that we all believe, right? They think that Jesus is coming back, right? We'll set that aside. But they're there because of one thing and one thing only. It's oil and natural gas that comes from this region. And prior to the discovery of oil, it was trade routes, especially through the Suez Canal. The British wanted to secure their trade routes. Now, you know, today they're all up in arms about the Houthis in Yemen, right? And the Red Sea disruption. 16% of global trade passes through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal. Much of it is oil, natural gas, but others. Now, the British, we used to call them Great Britain, right? Alhamdulillah, they're no longer great. Only Allah is great. We always have to emphasize this, right? It used to be the empire that the sun never set upon. Now they barely see sun. They go to Greece to get a suntan, right? But literally, here what happened. The golden goose for the British was India. If you're from the Indian subcontinent, raise your hand. Okay? You still need the British to apologize to you. Not only that, they robbed and stole every last penny of your father's great-grandfather, great-grandfathers, and your family. When the British arrived to India, India was 24% of the global GDP. Understand this. India was 24% of the global GDP. By the time the British left, they reduced it to 3% of the GDP. Completely dismantled the economic strength of India, right? Stole $45 trillion worth of goods, which amount to 17 times current British GDP. Just to understand, right? I know people go and visit the British Museum. Oh, look how beautiful. It's a stolen property. You know Alibaba and the 40 thieves? Alibaba is in Guantanamo Bay and the 40 thieves are in the Louvre and the London Museum. Every last piece in there is stolen from the colonies, and the Indian colonies and the Egyptian colonies where much of those resources were taken out from. 45 trillions. Dismantled the garment industry in India, which was one of the most important industries at the time. Disrupted its agriculture production. Disrupted the networks of trade. I know you go to the British and somebody with a British accent, because you have to speak like a British accent, right? Say, oh, we built you railroads. No, the Indian paid for the railroads. Even though they had their own production of railroad cars, they were forced to buy railroad cars from the British in order for the British factories to be functioning, while the Indians actually will go into unemployment. Right? And the British also had 2 occasions where genocide was committed against India by starvation. Close to 13 million Indians starved to death. That's history. Right? We go to England and we take pictures, oh, selfies. No, you need to actually ask for reparation. You need to demand for an apology. You need for them to account for them. They make you feel that you are what you call uncivilized. Uncivilized? You rob my house and then you treat me as uncivilized? Right? So the British, in order to take their loot out of India, they needed a safe route. Just if you deal drugs in the neighborhood, you need to, what you call, have a secure way. So you have a lookout, right? As you sell the $20, while the banker is waiting for the big month, right? You secure all the way until you get the drug sold. So the British colonized Yemen and colonized Egypt and Sudan. So you steal the stuff from India and you bring it and you pass through, and then they had the Suez Canal between them and the French. That's history. Again, they don't contest facts. They just say, oh, well, this is old history. It's not old. It's just yesterday. Especially if you go to the museum and see all the things that in there. I don't know if everybody like stays up to watch the royal family, right? The royal family weddings. Oh, so beautiful. Look at this dress. It's stolen stuff. Oh, look at the crown. It's stolen diamonds. Right? Oh, the crown jewel of the what you call the royal crown. Oh, it's stolen stuff. I haven't seen a cartel showing what they stole in public and not actually being shy about it. Right? Again, because we're smitten, because we think civilization actually is in London. All right, civilization comes out of France with Macron. I call him Mufti Macron these days, because every day he stands up and says Muslims need to do this, need to do that. MashaAllah, he has a compendium of fatwas about Islam and Muslim, and he set up a board for governing Muslims in France. All right, I hope he distribute like Louis Vuitton hijabs for everybody. Then we'll say, okay, alhamdulillah, MashaAllah, you're coming along. So the British were thinking about securing their loot, securing what they were taking and making sure that whatever they are taking comes to them, to the territory. So the Nakba for the Palestinians begins in 1917. Anyone that thinks the Nakba begins in 48 is mistaken, because the British begin the Nakba of the Palestinians. They implement during the mandate from 1917 to 1948. Facilitating Zionist immigration and settlement in Palestine, facilitating land transfer, oppressing Palestinian uprising and closing eyes or encouraging underground Zionist militias, the Irgun, Haganah, and others. All the first prime ministers of Israel were all designated terrorists by the British, none other than the British. Shamir, Menachem Begin, right? All were actually accused of bombing the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, assassinating Count Bernadotte, who was from Sweden, coming to negotiate and create a settlement post-1948. Economic empowerment of Zionists, and then the British withdraw without any political settlement, handing it to the United Nations. You need to know this: Vladimir Jabotinsky, founder of the Revisionist Zion. Netanyahu's father is the editor and the keeper of Jabotinsky's papers. He's the forefather of the Likud party. And Netanyahu is not going to go against his father. Again, Jabotinsky, you could respect him, at least he's very clear. Right? He says a voluntary reconciliation with the Arabs is out of the question, either now or in the future. If you wish to colonize a land in which people are already living, you must provide a garrison for the land, or find some rich man or benefactor who provide a garrison on your behalf. The rich man or right now or benefactor, it was the British, now it's us. We are actually the benefactor, our tax money, right? $100 billion, $14 billion, 16 billion, we are the benefactors. He says, or else give up your colonization, for without an armed force which will render physically impossible any attempt to destroy or prevent this colonization. Colonization is impossible, not difficult, not dangerous, but impossible. Zionism is a colonization adventure, and therefore it stands or fails by the question of armed force. It is important to speak Hebrew, but unfortunately, it's even more important to be able to shoot, or else I am through playing at colonizing. Again, very clear. You don't have Today, people who stand up, oh, it's not, it's a misunderstanding. It's a communication problem. There's no miscommunication. It's very understandable from the early Zionists what was taking place. Now, Joseph White's head of the Jewish Agency's colonization department, they literally had a colonization department. He says a solution to the refugee problem. He says, between ourselves, it must be clear that there is no room for both peoples together in this country. We shall not achieve our goal if the Arabs are in this small country. There is no other way than to transfer the Arabs from here to neighboring countries. All of them, not one village, not one tribe should be left. So if you think Netanyahu just today have his own plan, was literally centered on transfer. Ben Gvir, right, the Minister of Security, wants the Palestinians to be transferred. When Biden went to visit, he was supposed to have a meeting in Jordan. It was all a done deal that Egypt will agree to take the Palestinians, and Jordan is the attack on the hospital that killed 500 Palestinians at the day that scheduled that meeting. Right? Egypt debt will be repaid because Egypt owes about 170 billion. So the price of Palestinians, taking Palestinians literally, is forgiving or managing Egyptian debt as well as Jordanian debt. That's the discussion. It's not about whether it's ethical, whether it's moral, whether it's acceptable. It's whether can it be done and can we get the right price for it. Right? That's the reality that we're dealing with. So the rebellion of the 1936 ruler rebellion that climaxed in 38. The rebels numbered more than 15,000 and established a quasi-autonomous government. British responded first by mobilizing 20,000 troops and also using the Royal Air Force to bomb civilian population. About 15,000 Zionists were trained and placed under arms. 5,000 Palestinians were killed and 14,000 injured. 101 British and 463 Zionist Jews were killed at that time. As a result of this period, many Palestinians were sent to exile, including the political leadership of the Palestinians. So if you go to Latin America, there are Palestinians in Latin America that actually, as a result of that expulsion. There's a large Palestinian population in Chile. There's a large Palestinian population in El Salvador, some Palestinians in Algeria. So again, as a consequence of this, the opening the door for sending to exile, which was common for the British and the French whenever they faced opposition or resistance in their colonial territories. The partition plan, all right, 1948-47, Resolution 181 divided Palestine into two states. Zionist state was given 56% of the land, and the Arab state was given 42% of the land, Jerusalem 2% international. The Zionists at the time only had deeds to 6% of Palestine. 6% of Palestine, they had actual ownership of land. Yet they were given 56% of the territory by the so-called international community. But even in the Zionist land, or the Zionist state, it was actually not a decisive Jewish majority state. There were 492,000 Zionist Jews, 430,000 Palestinian Arabs. No decisive Jewish majority existed, thus the need to ethnically cleanse the state from its Arab population. Every racist regime always thinks of demography, always thinks about how to maintain a decisive majority. In the United States, we still do it, what you call informally. Every time that we have neighborhoods where large black population, white population flees and goes out to the suburbs, right? That's a racist construct. And we do all kinds of redlining, make it expensive for loans and so on. That's a racist strategy. We still have a legacy of it here in the United States. But every racist state, every racist regime works on demography. And anytime you hear somebody talks about demography, just say that's a racist statement that you are articulating. Right? So again, we need to understand demography. There's a whole demographic department, Israel. All what it's focused on was the population of Palestinians versus Jews in every area. And Jerusalem is one of the main centers for this type of contestation. Settler colonialism and motherland colonialism. Transfer, genocide, 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly transferred from their homes and land. 532 villages demolished and the population expelled, 12 urban centers cleansed, 100 massacres done to cause the flight of the Palestinians. So again, this is the Nakba of 1948, and today we're dealing with the other Nakba, which is interesting. The Israelis deny there was a Nakba in 48, yet they are taunting the Palestinians that you're going to face a second Nakba. Right? Talk about what you call needing a 12-step program. One, to understand what you did first, and the second, to understand the logic. By affirming the second, you are affirming the first. But again, I'm not accusing them that they study logic. It's no longer taught in schools. Literally, they're taunting the Palestinians with the Nakba while denying you're not allowed to teach the Nakba in Israel. Right? Because it did not happen. But yet, they are threatening the Palestinians in Gaza of the second Nakba. So the Nakba, So the Nakba in terms of what happened, Yitzhak Rabin, he said, we walked outside, Ben Gurion accompanying us, alone repeated his question, what is to be done with the population? Ben Gurion waved in his hand in gesture which said, drive them out. The population of Lid did not leave willingly. There was no way of avoiding the use of force and warning shots in order to make the inhabitants march the 10 or 15 miles to the point where they met up with the legion. So as you see the pictures today, from North Gaza to the center of Gaza to the south of Gaza to the discussions about Rafah, just think that this is exactly the same method that was used in 1948. The only difference today is we have it live streamed. It's the first time in history that we have a genocide being live streamed, right? The Israelis don't even contest the facts. So much so that actually the soldiers are actually literally taking pictures and live streaming what they're doing. They're saying that we're doing it in self-defense and that the Palestinians, Hamas, is actually having the civilians as human shields, and we need to protect ourselves by demolishing every aspect of human life. There is no contestation that they actually blown up 14 universities. There's not an argument about it. It's a fact. They did it. They actually literally, they were given it as a gift, whether it's a wedding gift, a birthday gift, a Valentine gift to whoever, and they videotaped it. Right? Just think about it. A university, a state, recognized in the United Nations, part of the membership of the United Nations, its soldiers are blowing up a university. And what do we have in here? The university presidents in the US are attacking students for justice in Palestine because they're saying it's genocide. Oh, that's an anti-Semitic statement. Blowing up a university is seen as a self-defense. Saying genocide is seen as anti-Semitic. That just like is complete insanity, right? In terms of what is taking place. If you actually read and watch the Israeli news casts in their TVs, radios, and newspapers, you will be actually shocked to the extensive coverage that they have of the genocide and the discussions about it more than what you find in the United States. Literally, there is no discussion. They actually have people on the TV saying, yeah, we need to kill them all. Literally, it's open. It's, we have no problem. In the Knesset, in the middle of the Knesset yesterday, somebody posting that we have no problem of killing everybody in Gaza. Now, willful denial from what happens. Right? So it's not only today. There was no such thing as Palestinians. They never existed. This is Golda Meir, Israeli Prime Minister. Just yesterday, Ben Gvir said there is no such thing as Palestinians. So this is from 69, right, till now. Again, I'm going to step back. Again, I agree with you. There is no such thing as Palestinians, so you must be fighting ghosts. Right? If they don't exist, then who are these people that we see around there? Right? There must be something. Either they exist or they don't exist. If they exist, then you have a problem. If they don't exist, then you have a problem. So again, this is what you call the lack of logic these days that we see. The Nakba never stopped. We must use terror, assassination, intimidation, land confiscation, and the cutting of all social services to rid the Galilee of its Arab population. This was the strategy to empty the Galilee of the Arab population. There was a whole memorandum of what needs to be done. This is very important because people, October 7th, history begins on October 7th. All right? So we begin to say October 7th and then narrate from thereafter, rather actually thinking of even before October 7th, this was the bloodiest year for the Palestinians before October 7th. Right? Do we forget almost on a daily basis, 2 to 3 Palestinians are being shot or killed? Shireen Abu Akleh was assassinated before October 7th. Palestinian journalists were being shot at almost on a daily basis before October 7th. Now, this is T-shirts that you get, right? This is what says, let every Arab mother know that her son's fate is in my hands. This is on a shirt. This says the shirt about, Israel, worn casually and comfortably by an Israeli student at an Israeli university. Oh, sorry. Well, right there. So this is on a shirt. There's another shirt which had a Palestinian pregnant woman. It says, 1 bullet, 2 lives. Literally. And a shirt that is sold, bought, and people actually wear it on a regular basis. Now, this is the government that during the election, we have the 3 musketeers. These are the 4 war criminals. An Israeli man walks an electoral billboard bearing portraits of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, flanked by far-right politician Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and Michael Ben-Ari, with a caption in Hebrew reading, Kahana lives, in a reference to a banned ultra-nationalist party, Jerusalem, on March 29th, 2019. Now, if you don't know who Meir Kahana is an American, extreme right-wing, one of the key founder of the settlement movement and violent settlement movement, and this literally Ben-Gvir, Smotrich are beholden to the Kahanist movement. Also, he's one of those who inspired the Baruch Goldstein, who walked into the Ibrahimi Mosque in Khalil in 1995 and shot 49 Palestinians during the morning prayer during Ramadan and injured 100. His grave is still right outside of Al Khalil, and it's a site of visitation, including Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, whom had a picture of him in their office. So that's again Kahana. The Kahanist movement is recognized as a terrorist organization in the United States by the State Department. So that's what you are dealing with when talking about the current government. And Ben-Gvir actually was charged many times with criminal behavior and intent. What we have also is the current changes, Netanyahu and settler colonialism. This is recent changes in the law. He says the Jewish people have an exclusive and unquestionable right to all areas of the land of Israel. Meaning there is no such thing as a two-state solution for those individuals that continue to say the Palestinian two. Israel says no. And just yesterday, Netanyahu says no two-state solution. The policy statement partly reads, with this absence of distinction, the new government pledged to develop Area C, which is about 60% of the West Bank, and to strengthen Israel's colonial occupation of Jerusalem under the pretext of preserving and developing a united Jerusalem. Today, Israel announced 3,000 new housing units in settlements, just today. All right? So we're talking about, this is the policy that is in effect. And the coalition government also stated that the nation of Israel has a natural right to the land of Israel. Remember, the Balfour Declaration says a natural connection. So now it's moving to natural right to the land of Israel with such a sweeping statement. The elimination of eliminates Israel's colonial history. The document also pledges that in light of the belief in the aforementioned right, the Prime Minister will formulate and promote policies within whose framework sovereignty will be applied to Judea and Samaria. So that's where literally the notion of two-state solution, the notion of Palestinians having any sovereignty, was completely torpedoed. Okay, let me go back. So this is the list of current Israeli leaders' statement, right? The focus is on destruction, not accuracy. In here, the current, there will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. We will turn Gaza into an island of ruins, right? So again, the policy is genocidal intent, because in genocide you have to prove intent. So this is again the intent of all of the top Israeli leaders in this sense. If we think about the current settlement activity, for those who followed the Oslo Agreement, in 1993 the Palestinians signed the Oslo Agreement. At the time of signing Oslo Agreement, there were 130,000 settlers in the West Bank. Today, mashallah, with the objection of the United States and Europe, a promise of two-state solution, we have, mashallah, 750,000 settlers in the West Bank. All right? So, in essence, while the Europeans and Americans continue to speak about two-state solution or promising the Palestinians that we're gonna actually buy you a pizza, the Israeli settlers and government were sitting on the side eating all the pizza and devouring all the flour that might come. So again, 760,000 settlers that are currently in the occupied, with a large segment from the United States. A large segment of United States citizens, right, that went and settled. And when you settle, you get all kinds of economic incentives, tax deductions, so on, to actually go and live in the settlements. I know we donate. You know that you could donate for the Friends of the Israeli Defense Force? You know that? You could do that? You could donate. There's an organization, Friends of the Israeli Defense Force, here in the United States. You could buy them boots, you could buy them binoculars, you could buy them all kinds of stuff. Tax deductible, mashallah. All right? That's in here, in the United States. Now, the U.S. policy actually empowers and emboldens Israel. The United States cast veto in the UN Security Council, 3 vetoes in the past 4 months, extending military and economic support, right, open-ended, and also got a lot of the weapons, the pre-positioned weapons. There's pre-positioned weapons in Jordan, pre-positioned weapons in Saudi Arabia, pre-positioned weapons in the Gulf states. All that was funneled to Israel, right, to support Israel's war. And not only that, again, I critique US and Europe, but the Arab and Muslim world is as atrocious in actually making possible Israel war on the Palestinians. The Egyptian Rafah border is under Egyptian control. Egypt has the right and the power to open that border. It doesn't. Since the Houthi have disrupted the trade in the Red Sea, all of the trade that is coming goes to United Arab Emirates. It unloads in United Arab Emirates port. Is shipped through Highway 65 in the Holy Land of Saudi Arabia. Passes through Saudi Arabia, goes into Jordan to King Hussein Bridge in the north and crosses supplies to Israel. That's what's happening as we speak. So it's not only Israel fighting and killing the Palestinians, it's the Israelis, the Americans, the British, the Canadians, the Germans, right? Australians, New Zealanders, and then the Arab and Muslim world participating. 57 Muslim majority states could not send a bottle of water across the border in Gaza. 57, this is 1/3 of the world membership in the United Nations. 25% of the world population. I don't blame the population, but I blame our political leadership. Right? 57 countries. Not a bottle of water. Right? That's the reality that we are dealing with. Again, if Israel wants to fight Hamas, mashallah, go and fight. You are actually killing civilians, right, as a way to try to implement your own transfer program. That's what's taking place. Bombing buildings, hospitals, schools, universities, ambulances, preventing food, medicine, everything for the civilian population. That's what's there. Again, for Geneva Convention, we're masters. We could read it for you all through. Links U.S. aid to normalization with Israel, incentives on corporate and military cooperation with Israel. The IT industry in this valley punishes opposition to Israel, whether it's the student population, SJP, employees, or anyone that speaks on Palestine is subject to punishment, criminalizes and target Palestinian activists. This is what we are facing in relations to how the U.S. actually empowers and emboldens Israel. So when Biden says it's over the top, genocide is not over the top, it's genocide, right? Biden stands up and says, well, he showed pictures of 40 babies decapitated. He did not see any pictures. Complete lie, complete propaganda, complete fabrication. So today still people say, baby's been decapitated by a Palestinian. No, that's a lie, and he knows it. He says that he spoke to Wadi' Fayyoumi from Illinois' father. He didn't. He had to actually rush and talk to the family afterward. Every time, so far, he has not spoken of the Palestinians that have been shot in Vermont. He didn't mention anything on his speech. He didn't say anything about the Palestinian who was stabbed in Austin, Texas. Right? 11,000 children, not a word about it. And everybody's talking about the hostages. I want to talk about the hostages. There's 8,500 Palestinian hostages that Israel is holding. If you want to speak about equal and fair and just, every human being is the same. So if you want to talk about the hostages there, 8,500. Some of them have been rotting for years in jail without charge. Women have been held. Over 572 Palestinian women are held. Administrative detention. Right? So again, we need to, if you want to have one standard, we will have one standard, applies to everyone. But don't come hypocritically and talk about one thing and insist you need to condemn. No, you need to condemn. If you condemn 48, we'll begin to actually have a whole process. You begin to talk about genocide, we'll talk about genocide. You want to talk about 100 massacres, you will need to talk about the 100 massacres. But don't come Johnny come lately, try to establish a moral standard because of what happened October 7th, but that 100 years is completely erasure. And they again begin to squirm. This is what the most atrocious event. No, Sabra and Shatila was the most atrocious event. Right? Sabra and Shatila in Lebanon, the massacring of Palestinian refugees. 11,000 babies is an atrocious attack that takes place. Right? So again, we need to be very firm in understanding what the moments that we're dealing with. So Palestine from Oslo, again, this is the map in the West Bank, but even this map is already outdated. Right? Because again, we call the Palestinian state in the West Bank as the leopard skin state. It's not disconnected. You cannot actually move from one town to the other without passing through all kinds of roads and bypass roads and so on. We spoke about the uprooted trees to build the wall. What is it? All right, so this is the uprooted trees to build the apartheid wall. This is the footprint of the wall. It's about 100 yards across. All this land was taken from Palestinians. That's in the West Bank. All right, so this is again, Palestinians are right now have 15% of historical Palestine. This is the Trump's plan. Now I want to move a little bit to tell you why today this is a daily occurrence on Al-Aqsa Mosque. Every day there's these settlers. These are not what you call your tourists coming in to take a selfie. These are people coming every day to say that they want to establish a third temple and demolish Al-Aqsa Mosque as a priority. Okay, that's who they are. They're not, because you get some of these what you call Johnny come lately from this sophisticated bunch in here. Oh, the Muslims don't want people to come and see. No, you're not coming as a tourist. I'm sorry. You're coming as a settler colonial with the intent of undermining Palestinian presence in their religious site. That's what the whole strategy about. Right? So again, these settlers, almost daily tours, preventing Palestinians from actually accessing the site, protected by military personnel. Again, this is a Palestinian mosque and a Muslim mosque by international law. Okay, again, per whether Resolution 181 or even if you go to the 1931 British court ruling on it. Okay, again, these settlers coming with school outings, specifically to say that this is a Zionist Jewish property and that mosque has to be demolished to build the temple. That's literally what gets to be articulated almost on a daily basis. All right? So again, and then the Israeli police, military takes position on the property, on Al-Aqsa, harassing people. Now, what you have is the phenomenon here is the settlers taking over houses. So in the middle of the night, a settler group will come and take over a Palestinian house. And they throw the residents out. In any civilized country, when somebody come at night to your house, you pick up the phone and you call the police. The police comes and take those who attacked your house out. Not in Jerusalem, not in the West Bank, not in Sheikh Jarrah. When the police comes, they protect the settlers. And if you're lucky, they'll allow the Red Crescent or the Red Cross to give you a tent, to set up a tent across the street from your house, and they refer the matter to the court. But it's a military court because you are subject to military order, and the military court is 3 judges that are settlers themselves. And the case never gets resolved, so you still, if you go to Jerusalem right now, if you go to Sheikh Jarrah, where people have been living in their tents across the street from their house for 10 years, 15 years ongoing. And as again, this is what takes place almost on a daily basis. Okay, we're getting ready to Ramadan, which almost every Ramadan there is an attack upon the Muslims in Al-Aqsa during Taraweeh and during prayer. So literally this takes place on a regular basis. Most people in the West Bank are not allowed access to Jerusalem. So most people actually are, literally you could see Al-Aqsa Mosque from your house in the West Bank, but you're not allowed to go in. So literally you cannot actually make it in there, the restrictions. And also Christians who live just maybe 10 miles away from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest site of Christianity, are not able to go to pray in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, whether in Easter or in Christmas. So people actually end up praying in the streets just wherever they're stopping. They stop and people sit and pray. Now this takes place also, it's people who have somebody dies from their family, they want to take them to pray on them in Al-Aqsa. So you end up actually not being able to take even your dead to be prayed upon Al-Aqsa. You end up actually praying on them in the street outside of Jerusalem because you're not allowed to actually pray. Even in death, you have no access. You're subject to checkpoints and restrictions. And then constant use of tear gas on people in Al-Aqsa, assault on the actual inside Al-Aqsa with all kinds of damage that is there. Some of the windows that have been there for hundreds of years have been damaged, again with all kinds of tear gas. There's no reason or purpose for the Israeli military or police to be in Al-Aqsa Mosque. The mosque has its own security police, right, to take care of whatever needs are there. They come in specifically as a sign of show of force and intimidation. It has no security purpose for the Palestinians. No Palestinian is asking for them to come in for any security purpose. And literally, they come to intimidate, to show force, to say who is the boss in here and who is this territory, as a literally constant harassment. And we're waiting for Ramadan, and Ramadan is going to be literally a whole season for this constant attack. So I'm going to stop in here, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair for listening. There's much to be said. But what today we're facing, again, is a settler colonialism that continues to unfold. And we are in the middle of genocide. And we need to understand that it's not a matter of saying it lightly. It's close to 35,000 killed. For each person killed, you have about 3 to 4 that have been injured. So we're dealing about 100 to 120,000 that have been impacted. Right? We're getting closer to about 10% of the Palestinian population. We're having real cases of starvation where people don't have food, don't have access to water, especially in the north. There is restrictions that are imposed on the entry of supplies, with the Israeli government literally wanting, their good case scenario is to expel the Palestinians in Gaza with facilitation through Egypt. That's their good case scenario. And literally, we are minute by minute to try to get the United States to possibly mount some type of pressure. One, to prevent now the attack on Rafah, because that's 1.5 million people that are congregated and pushed in tents. So literally, any type of attack will lead to massive casualties, not like even much greater than before. And the second, we are actually having death by starvation and lack of medical supplies. So the two things from the U.S. administration right now, again, we're coming into the election season where Biden, we're calling him Genocide Joe. Right? Genocide Joe thinks that he could talk with the Muslims and we will be happy because maybe he'll say we're going to deal with Islamophobia. Let me say the following. Sending military supplies and supporting Netanyahu is one of the highest forms of Islamophobia today. And no amount of public relations, no amount of what you call getting and rubbing elbows with Kamala Harris or anyone will actually change where the Muslims are at. Our demands are very clear, and our vote is not going for a public relations campaign. We're beyond the public relations campaign at this point, and we need to make sure that these statements and these understandings are there. Prevent any attack on Rafah right now, and open access to humanitarian aid immediately, right? And then the third will be the ceasefire, immediate ceasefire, unconditional. The United States have vetoed ceasefire resolution 3 times. So, Jazakumullah khair, barakallah fikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much, Dr. Hatem Bazian. That was a wonderful talk. I'm sure everybody benefited a lot from understanding the history. There's a lot of complexity that many of us weren't even aware of until this calamity struck Gaza this year. I'm thankful to you for the little semblance of hope that you provide. I would want to know from you, as if you could give us a couple of more minutes of what you see as the, if not the immediate term of the ceasefire and the humanitarian aid. Do you see any semblance of hope in the medium to long term? Because as we see the history, it's been very bleak. If you wouldn't mind finishing off on that.
Yeah. Well, I do think there is hope that the world is mobilizing like never before. They are already understanding the hypocrisy. The Western hypocrisy is very clear. They no longer, what you call, can have a fig leaf to cover their hypocrisy. And I do think that the Muslims in this country have a decisive role to play in this upcoming midterm and election. I think our brothers and sisters in Michigan have mobilized heavily. They refused to meet with the Biden administration. He first sent them, his campaign staff, meaning that this is already at the time 9,000 children and babies killed. The only thing he sent is his campaign staff, not even his policy staff. Then, people refused to meet with him. Then he sent some of his top White House policy. There was a meeting with some of the elected officials. So I think Michigan will have to wait next week is their primary, and we do expect a large number of people to vote uncommitted because they have that option, and that shows where the strength is at. He won Michigan in 2020 by 120,000 votes, if I'm mistaken, give or take. And I said 2 or 3 Muslim weddings, right, will be 120,000 votes. Right? So basically, Michigan, you can't have a path to the White House without Michigan. Similar is Georgia. Georgia has mobilized similarly in a very strong way. And it's not surprising that some of the black clergy from Georgia actually have spoken very strongly at this point and calling for a ceasefire. So I think in the next 2 weeks are so critical for us to continue to mount the pressure and to continue to insist in these policy changes from the administration on both Rafah and the humanitarian aid. And then I think a large number of people are looking at the ICJ, the International Criminal, International not after the court 15-2 saying that plausibility of a genocide. So these are optimistic, but this is not to cover up the pain and suffering. That is, the pain and suffering is real, but there's definitely positive movements that are taking place in those areas.
So inshallah, we hope that, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in our lifetimes, that we're able to see those changes materialize into something tangible for the Palestinian people, inshallah, on that note. Any questions from?
I have a sharp cutoff at 9:50 because I have to do an interview with Turkish TV and radio live.
Yeah, we'll keep it really
on their morning news. So.
Painful though, you gave an excellent talk on history of Palestine. I have one question. I see a lot of street support for the Palestine cause, even in the United States.
Sure.
Why is not it getting translated into support for US in the Congress and in the White House?
Well, we have to translate our street movement, which we are good at, into effective points of pressure politically. And I do think there is positive development taking place politically. There are a large number of Muslims running for office. That's very, very positive. That has not happened in the past qualitatively. Also, people are running to the different elements because historically, Muslims either wanted to be the emperor. If not the emperor, they will be the king. Right? I think people are beginning to recognize that you need to be at every level of politics. So that's translating in there. The other part is that also there's been a strong push to creating political action committees across the country. That's very positive, including CARE and others. CARE have created a super PAC, which means that we have to coalesce our financial resources in order to have an impact. Our opposition, I study our opposition. I respect their tenacity and their skill. They're very well organized and they have their resources allocated correctly. And I think we're catching up with this in relations of knowing how to engage politically correctly. So we have the C3s, the C4, the political action committees, and people running for office. And from my side, working on developing the policy part. So when we actually attempting to engage at a congressional level and so on, what are the policy recommendations in a specific way? Our opposition has many think tanks and so on that does this, and we need to actually catch up with it. So that's where I'm optimistic, but our, let's say, our trajectory has to be accelerated because of the circumstances that we face.
All right. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. Let's give a big.
Thank you.